To Mayor Ginther, to Chief Quinlan, and to all of you. We want to welcome you to Columbus Southside Community and to the Reeb Avenue Center, which this month will celebrate 5 years of serving the Southside community and beyond. I'm proud to serve on its board as a community representative, having been reared in this community and attending it when it was the Reeb Avenue School. We are specifically in the Reeb-Hossack-Stilton Village area, where we have been seeing considerable change come into the area in collaboration with the city and its partners. We have included this facility, John Maloney Health Center, Parsons Village 1 and 2, and Enville Homes because of the Gateway Project. Unfortunately, your visit today is not a celebratory one, but it's here to speak about and hopefully resolve and come to some solutions of the violence, and specifically the gun violence in our community and the city at large. We find this violence daily and detrimental to the better health of the city of Columbus. We anticipate on listening to one another and working together to build a better and safer, family-friendly neighborhood. Charles Dickens is quoted as saying, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it is the age of foolishness." And he goes on to say, "It was a season of light, it was a season of darkness, it was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair." Today is the first day of school, and many will be learning from home thanks to the digital world we now live in. But for so many, there will be no home from which to learn, and they depend on others for not only their education, but for their survival. With daily events of violence, and again, specifically gun violence, our community is in fear. And in some cases, we feel a sense of abandonment and hopelessness that we've not felt before. The COVID-19 pandemic seems to have allowed some people to unleash actions towards one another and others that are totally unacceptable. This neighborhood has felt the loss of someone who was a daily visitor in the center. She was always here, and now she is no longer. Then there was a resident not far away, killed by a stray bullet in our senior citizen facility. And not far away as well, a 5-year-old shot by a stray bullet. Daily runs by the fire department EMS to our park for substance abuse overdose. The sound of gunfire is daily. When you combine a loss of employment, eviction, substance abuse, human trafficking, along with other significant increase in homelessness, it fuels feelings of frustrations often resulting in the death of innocent persons. We in the community also recognize that we must also think about those in whose shoes we do not walk, those who do not have shelter or food, who escape through substance abuse, who know not where to go for support or resources, and the behavior that will tear apart this community. It takes each of us working together to encourage each other to take advantage of the resources not only available here at the Reeb Center, but also in centers throughout the city. This is a hub of hope for the South Side, but it is overwhelmed by the activities that have occurred lately. So on behalf of the Reeb Avenue Center and the community, I'm hopeful that we'll be included in a plan or plans that will be proactive and beneficial to all, protective of our vulnerable citizens, which are the children and our seniors, encouraging and not retaliatory, and life-changing to better the lives of those willing to work along with those who are going to offer us a plan of solution. So Mayor Ginther, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and now we ask you how we're going to work together to resolve this.
Thank you, Donna, and the Reeb Avenue Center for hosting us here today, and Chief Quinlan and the Division of Police, Columbus Public Health and the CARE Coalition, Columbus Recreation and Parks, the Department of Neighborhoods, Ms. Keandra Brown, who we will hear from in just a few minutes, who was sharing with the chief, Donna, and I some stories of her beloved son who she lost to gun violence. Thank you for being here today and being willing to share your story. I know there's a temptation to track the homicides by the number, comparing the number to last year's or to other peer cities around the country. But that's a huge disservice to the families and to the neighborhoods who've lost loved ones, sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, even grandmothers, to violence. And I know you want to ask me and Chief Quinlan, what are you going to do to stop the violence? It is the wrong question. The question is, what are we going to do to stop the violence? Because the answer isn't simple, and it requires everyone in the community to participate in solving it. On August 12th, we launched a number of programs to help reduce the violence that we've seen this year, and I want to update you on this work. It's also important to recognize that many of these programs are working collaboratively among CPD, the CARES Coalition, and the Department of Neighborhoods. Our approach is to work on prevention and intervention together. We discussed the reroute plan, or micro-interventions, to reach out to young people who were heading down the wrong path that would likely lead them to committing more violent acts or becoming the victim of violence themselves. The purpose of reroute is to get at the root cause of violent crime committed by our youth, whether it's unemployment, lack of stable housing, absent parents, inability to continue with school. The goal with reroute is to provide the youth, and often the whole family, with needed resources for stabilizing the family versus prosecution. There are wraparound services from Franklin County Job and Family Services from the Family Stabilization Unit. There is admission of the young person into programs by apps from Recreation and Parks, such as Cared Straight, transformative approach that recognizes the threats of incarceration and punishment alone will not move at-risk young people towards a path of living and a better life. It is ultimately the support and care from a network of other young people and trusting adults that is necessary for behaviors and decision-making to change. This informed program was developed by at-risk young people with the guidance of the APPS team, as well as ACT, Advancing Community Trust. This is to further empower members of the Columbus community to be accountable for the safety and well-being of themselves as well as their neighbors. Specifically, we want individuals to take a responsible action to ensure the safety of themselves as well as the community when they witness or are aware of behaviors and/or environmental safety hazards that threaten the well-being of others, and helping to flag the family for additional intervention resources from faith or community programs. The status of this work is that the Division of Police, Juvenile Prosecutors, Rec and Parks, and the CARES Coalition have been working collaboratively to identify those who could benefit from intervention. The outreach is scheduled to begin this week. Last month, I talked about using CARES Act funding to help with outreach and intervention for youth. As you know, the CARES Act, dollars from the U.S. Treasury, is meant to be used to offset the costs associated with dealing with COVID-19. The purpose of this work is that our uptick in violence here in Columbus can be traced back to the ramifications of the global pandemic: unemployment, housing instability, no in-person school, athletics, and after-school extracurricular activities. We're using CARES Act funding for intervention. Our goal is to do outreach to youth through different avenues to build youth empowerment. Our status is we've identified 4 groups to provide $200,000 each to help us with this work. Community Development for All People, New Salem Community Development of Caring Foundation, Afrocentric Personal Development Shop, and the Shalom Zone. These groups are not doing the programs themselves, but will be providing funds to other groups that we might not be able to reach as a city, such as former gang members and groups like the Urban Scouts. In addition, we provided additional funding to My Brother's Keeper Village to strengthen and expand their programs. Our call to action is if you have a group or an idea to work with some of our at-risk youth, reach out to these nonprofits to provide their plans so that we can work with you. We also talked last month about our partnership with Grand Hospital, Columbus Public Health, Columbus Recreation and Parks, called VOICE, standing for Violence, Outreach, Intervention, Community Engagement. The purpose is to provide bedside intervention to victims of assault and gunshot wounds while they're in the hospital. Our goal is to help find out how and why the victims were involved and provide opportunity for change. Our progress is that we've onboarded an interventionist in recreation and parks and are in the process of hiring a social worker through Columbus Public Health. Actual intervention work will begin by the end of the year. A reminder that this work will be collaborative with the Violent Crime Review Group and the CARES Coalition. I would now like to invite our Chief of Police, Tom Quinlan, to talk a little bit about trends and challenges that CPD is seeing, along with give an update on Shotspotter that we had talked a few weeks about and its expansion. Chief Quinlan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the Reeb Center. I took this job to make a difference. Nothing is more important to police than keeping peace and order in our neighborhoods. Despite our best intentions, today we face a dilemma. I am committed to work within the framework of our legal system, keeping peace and order in our streets while working within a flawed system is making a difficult job even more impossible. We need each other. Teens in this community are counting on us, whether they will be our future victims or the accused. We can make a difference for them. Time is of the essence. We need community involvement in solving the problems we face. We need guns secured and kept out of teens' hands. We all must be vocal, and we must make our intentions for change clear. We need people to participate in investigations. We need to help each other. When a community experiences deaths from gun violence like we are reporting here, there is a risk of becoming numb to mere statistics. It is too easy to forget the real lives that make up these statistics. The source of this violence has touched every corner of our city. Many were innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, and some merely children asleep in their beds. Real lives lost, futures eliminated. Like on the city's north end, Enrique Forney, a 17-year-old black male killed in the area of 5400 Mallards March at 12:03 a.m., suffering from gunshot wounds. Joseph Jewell, a 17-year-old black male, was charged with his murder. The next day, Mr. Jewell was involved in a violent shootout with SWAT officers, resulting in his death. On the city's east side, Willie Felder, an 18-year-old black male, suffering from gunshot wounds. He died at 9:41 p.m. at an area hospital. The killer is still wandering the streets of Columbus as we speak. On the city's south side, Ellen Lackey, a 64-year-old white female, standing at her stove cooking breakfast at 1843 Parsons Avenue, when several people fired multiple gunshots down on the street. A stray rifle bullet went into her fourth-floor apartment and struck her. She died at 5:19 a.m. Again, the people responsible for indiscriminately firing more than 30 rifle rounds in our city are still at large today. On the city's west side, Kenneth Ramsey, a 58-year-old male white, was found inside 5913 O'Reilly Road, suffering from a gunshot wound. He died at 3:46 p.m. The accused killer, Joshua Binkley, a 20-year-old white male, was arrested and charged with murder. In the Linden area, Nizer Terry, a 14-year-old black male, was found lying in the intersection of Loretta and Medina, suffering from gunshot wounds. He died at 9:45 p.m. The person responsible, Jameer Davis, a 16-year-old black male, and Kenyon Hairston, a 15-year-old black male, have been charged with murder and arrested. Again, in the Linden area, Azier Lewis, a unborn 35-week-old fetus, did not survive a shooting involving his 15-year-old pregnant mother, who did survive her injuries. The shooting occurred at Joyce and Danoon. These dangerous felons have yet to be caught. On the Near East Side, Ramir Harris, a 2-year-old black male, was discovered inside 332 Monroe, suffering from a gunshot wound. He died 8:29 p.m. The person responsible, his uncle, Charles Hodge, a 14-year-old black male babysitting, accessed a firearm inside the home and fired the weapon, killing his nephew. He's charged with reckless homicide. And in the heart of downtown, 23-year-old Darian Smith, a female black, was shot and killed when a fight broke out between two groups of males. One began firing randomly and a stray round killed her. She was an innocent bystander. The person responsible remains walking the streets of Columbus today. Last week, I visited the homes of many of these homicides and talked with people in the neighborhoods. People are scared. People want answers. People want help. And people want the indiscriminate violence to end. So what is the threshold between indifference and intolerance? I've been clear in previous press conferences. I support police-initiated diversion programs for youth. I support summons in lieu of arrest practices for nonviolent misdemeanors. I support resources that can be offered to our youth through the Juvenile Courts Reception Program and many of the programs, the great programs that the mayor mentioned that we are working on as a community. I support all those. But what I will not support is when young people, whether an adult or juvenile, have been charged with violent crimes in the use of or possession of firearms and continue to be released without consequences, who undoubtedly place our community in danger. Let's find solutions before we continue to provide opportunities for new crimes to occur. We are responding to demands for police reform and accountability. It is my hope there is equal demand for reform and accountability by all partners in the criminal justice system. Judges must do what only they can in the system, and that is to detain people accused of violent gun crimes. Only when all partners work towards our shared responsibility of addressing these criminal actions, the activities that are driving this violence, we can save lives. Back on August 12th, I announced a plan to focus on hardcore offenders and saturate areas experiencing the most violence. The remedy within the power of police is simply to bring an individual before the court. Our patrol officers who put themselves in harm's way are working with our detectives, our forensic analysts, and our criminal intelligence folks to identify and arrest individuals identified through physical evidence like crimes caught on camera, DNA, gun tracing, and victims and witnesses who bravely step forward, or through suspect interrogations and confessions. We ask people to report gun crimes, report stolen guns, call Crime Stoppers at 614-461-8477. Email guncrimes@columbuspolice.org if you have information on any violent crime, solved or unsolved. We will continue evidence-based policing strategies. We rely on hotspot maps, predictive analytics, ballistic technologies, and staffing to help us combat the violence. We are expanding a very successful program in our neighborhoods. Shotspotter is a system that alerts police when gunshots are fired, even if no one calls us. We follow up on these occurrences, canvass neighborhoods, looking for evidence left behind, searching for Ring doorbell video and other witnesses willing to speak out. We use our forensics lab to analyze the evidence left behind by these shootings. Our lab has been exceptionally successful and is operating at 260% of the national average and has seen a 119% increase in associations and evidence analyzed to crimes in our neighborhoods. Success will be measured by all of us working together. For us to save lives, it requires a group effort. Police are limited to detecting, intervening, and apprehending. Stemming this violence will require more than what police can deliver alone. It is apparent our goals of reducing gun violence are not being achieved. But instead of adjusting our goals, we need to adjust our action steps. We need to involve everyone in the solution. Let's make the adjustments together, and our community will be safer for all we do collectively. Now, instead of discussing statistics, I talked about the actual names and the people that we've lost in our community. The police, unfortunately, have to speak out for victims sometimes because they're not here to speak for themselves. We are fortunate today to have Kendra Brown. Sometimes it's left to the family to speak out for their loved ones, and she's willing to share her story with us today. And so it's my privilege to invite her up to speak about losing her son, Brendan, to gun violence last year. Kendra?
Good afternoon. My name is Kendra Brown, and first, I would like to thank you for inviting me to share me and my son's story. My story is very unique. On February 2nd, 2016, I started a page on Facebook called the Columbus, Ohio Remembrance Page. The Remembrance Page is a tribute page to honor our loved ones who passed away due to various causes, but mainly homicides. I wanted to do what I could to help the community in some way and have a place where we can all go to grieve together and be there for each other without arguing, no racial tension, only love. I never expected my small act of kindness to be as big as it is. Nor did I ever expect to have to post my own child on the Remembrance Page. From the time your child is born, you instill values in them to be a great person, to help others, and to be a productive member of society. You raise them to have respect for life and respect for others. I say my story is unique because I raised my child to be a great person and to respect others, and something bad still happened to him because someone else's child didn't. My 18-year-old son, Brendan Marte Brown, wasn't a troubled teenager. He had no record, never been around guns, wasn't a gang member. He truly was a great young man. He just graduated from high school, worked at Cheryl's Cookies, and just bought his first truck and had his whole life ahead of him. His life was taken because he was trying to help a friend by giving that friend's friend a ride. Out of 6 young men in the truck, my son was the one who was robbed and shot multiple times and killed. 5 young men are living their life while my son is in the ground and his case is still unsolved. My heart is broken. I did everything I could as a parent to make sure that my son wasn't a threat to others. And he was still taken from me. But through my pain, I still pressed on with the Remembrance Page in hopes that Columbus could see the pain that we're all going through and put the guns down. It is a community effort. It isn't just on the police. It isn't just their fight. It's all of our fight. I have since I'm turning my pain towards helping others. I have started a nonprofit to help with funeral assistance. Because of my own experience, I see a need. There was no assistance for me, and a lot of people do not have life insurance. So I want to help provide families with life insurance policies, also to help them with funeral assistance, and also to go help them with their day-to-day functions, their washing the dishes, helping them helping them with answering phone calls. When you lose your loved one, your mind goes. And after the detectives leave, the family is left destroyed. So we all need to come together and be there for each other during these times of need. So BB Angels would be there to help the best way that we can in helping our fellow community by being there. My experience with my son, no parent should have to bury their child. We want them to bury us. They're our future. By our children's lives being taken so soon, that's leaving us. Who's going to help us when we get older? Who's going to be there for us? So please put the guns down. At the end of the day, a family is left destroyed. 9 out of 10 is for something simple, something petty. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my son's story. And please put the guns down.
Ms. Brown, Kendra, thank you for sharing your story. Stand here not just as a mayor, but a father of a 10-year-old. I cannot imagine the pain and grief you've been through, and just grateful for you coming to share your story, put a face and a name to this violence, the impact it's having on families throughout our community, and your commitment to make positive contributions to support families in need. Appreciate you. Can't say this enough. 101 homicides in Columbus. We've had 101 families and friends destroyed by violence. When your cameras turn off or your stories are posted, the mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, friends and neighbors are still grieving. In addition to the plans I laid out and the updates Chief Quinlan has given, we know a number of other community and faith organizations and their leaders are rolling up their sleeves and getting to work too. The NAACP starting a social media campaign to build awareness around violence and safe gun storage. Many community groups have led marches in their neighborhoods. Faith leaders have continued to be speaking from the pulpit to reach their congregations and engage us with this work. My call to the community is to ask yourselves what you can do. Can you reach out to young people that you know might be headed in the wrong direction? Can you volunteer your time to mentor or be a big brother or big sister? And do you have information that might help solve a homicide, or just as important, prevent another one from taking place? This is not a police problem. It's not a city problem. It's not a community problem. The problem of violence belongs to all of us. We'll take a few questions from the press if you have any. Yes, Lacey.
This is the fourth press conference we've had this summer to talk about the violence in the city. We've heard a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same TAPS program, etc. I know you say it's not a Mayor Ginther problem, it's a we problem. But what is the mayor going to do so we don't have to have the 5th press conference? What is the mayor going to do to prevent more tragedy?
Well, obviously, what we've shared today, giving an update on, and things we announced a few weeks ago, are a different approach. As we talked earlier in the summer, the violence we're facing this summer is different than violence we've faced in the past. Our average age of a homicide victim this year is 24. Last year it was 37. We know, based on some of the statistics that Chief Quinlan shared, that we know that we have to go about our strategies and our approach in a different way, really trying to focus on young people that are committing more and more significant acts of violence. And so that requires a different approach, and that's what we've outlined previously and gave an update on today. Obviously, the expansion of Shotspotter in the 3 neighborhoods that we're already in, but also into the south side, I think will also help. But we really need the community to step up too with information about some of these crimes so that we can get what is a relatively small number of individuals who are committing multiple acts of violence off of our streets. Chief, you want to speak to any more about how this violence is different than what we've seen in the past and how we're approaching things?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lacey, for the question. Again, the frustration I think that a lot of us feel is that teens are taking risks and actions that we had not encountered before. Our focus on people, places, and behaviors have been more of a global look at how we reduce crime and how we keep everyone safe. Right now, with the willingness of adults, before we asked adults to keep guns out of teens' hands, now we're seeing adults actually put guns in teens' hands because they know they won't face the same consequence that an adult does. That has to change how we approach the strategy. It took a while for us to interact with enough youth to talk to people to find out how they're coming about getting guns and what crimes they're committing and what they're being set out in the world to do and in our community. And so we're finding these out through our interviews and interrogations of people we encounter, through talking to people in the community. And we need to change our approach just based on the fact that what we used to see and how we would normally attack the analytics of hotspots, putting cops on dots as a common phrase, is now not the same approach because you have the teens that are going wherever the opportunity presents itself to use gun violence. And they have the access to weapons. And again, adults are the ones who have an ability to deny that opportunity for that teen to have that weapon. When you see right on YouTube in our community, teens broadcasting the weapons that they have access to and using, and nobody's outraged, is a problem. It's a problem for us. It's a problem for the community. Why would they change if no one's holding them accountable? So that's what we need to change the approach on. That's what we're hoping to have an impact. Again, I'm here to make a difference, and that's what we need to do.
Are you especially concerned given the fact that CCS is virtual right now? The teens that maybe would be in school or at home right now, maybe supervised, maybe not?
It's certainly a factor that we have to consider in how we approach this problem in our community. I don't want to blame it on being the only factor. There are a lot of different pressures and opportunities out there that are driving this. I think if we can get through this pandemic and get back to more life as we all are used to living and have teens in school and have after-school activities and athletics and school plays and you name it, band, we'll have things for people to do other than hang out with crowds and get into trouble. Thank you.
I think it really, Chief, I think you hit on it, but I think it really gets to the fact that, This is why we made funding of the Chromebooks and high-speed internet such a high priority for the school district, so that more young people would be able to start this year, albeit virtually, with the tools they needed to be successful. That's why we announced just last week the reopening of rec centers and programming, particularly geared towards young people, students in Columbus City Schools and other districts that are learning virtually, so there are places where they can go engage in constructive, positive activities, physical activity, interacting with other young people, loving and caring adults. All of these things are part of our approach because to your question earlier, this is different, and so we have to respond differently, even in the midst of a global pandemic. And it's why, albeit imperfect as it was, our offerings for summer camp and summer programming through recreation and parks were so important, because in this environment, based on what our young people are facing, the isolation, the depression, the frustration, we need to be doing everything we can to provide other positive things for them and their families. Yes, Beth.
You talked about a small group of people are committing a lot of these crimes. I'm guessing they're not watching this press conference right now. When we all, as reporters, have been out at crime scenes, we see what appears to be intimidation tactics by people in the neighborhoods, sitting on cars, watching who's talking to police, who's talking to reporters. How do you get people in these neighborhoods with that as their living environment, where they have to live with people that they know are committing crimes and they don't want to target on their back to come forward? How do you guarantee that they're going to be safe and protected when we've had 101 homicides, a sharp increase in the felonious assaults in this community, and more than 2,500 calls of shots fired since June 1st?
So a number of things. Obviously, I'll let the chief speak to what we're doing to make sure that folks are safe when they come forward and share information with the Division of Police. But that's why being able to share information anonymously is so important, not necessarily maybe on the scene with officers, but the ability to report that information and offer up tips anonymously is very, very important. The chief can speak to whether or not that's been successful this year, and other things we need to be doing to provide that anonymity to folks to share information so we can get this group of folks off of the street. But that's a critically important component, is continuing to expand strategies that are working. As you know, we had a homicide record back in 2017, and out of that came the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy. We brought down violence dramatically in 2018 and 2019. We're seeing a different type of spike in violence this year that we've been talking about, and so it's required us to change our strategy and add some new approaches to things. To make sure that we're really targeting the spike in violence we're seeing, not the violence that we were seeing 3 years ago, because it was very different. Chief, you want to speak to tips?
So there's actually a law that requires people to report crime. And it's a felony if there's a homicide and they have information don't report. So I understand and appreciate your concern about people being retaliated against or in fear. I have yet to meet a young person without one of these in their hand. It's a free download, Columbus Police app. They can download the app and they anonymously share their tip with us. They can call Crime Stoppers at 461-TIPS. They can email gun crimes. Now, if you email, there may be a trace on where the origination was. But if you do put it on this phone, which everyone has in their hand, and email us the tip, we cannot trace it. The company that wrote the app for us cannot trace who you are. Send us the information, we will follow up on it. And this is something that I understand that won't be popular among the media, but our public records laws work against us. I know you count on public records laws, but those laws work against us when you're talking about anonymity and reporting crime, because we have to record that. At some point, it will become public, and that has a chilling effect. So I would support ways that legislatively isolating people who have come forward and given us information to be protected and have some type of anonymous identifier with them, so they can be looked at in court, but not through the public lens. Thank you.
Two-part question. Some officers are telling us that they're afraid to do their jobs in the current culture. So what role do you think that's playing in the uptick in violence? Part B to the question is, we've requested the Baker-Hostetler after-action report on the police conduct from the protests and riots. And we are told that in those 40 incidents being investigated, that majority of those officers were acting within department policy. Can you confirm that? And what's the culture? And would you say that you have concerns about maybe police not being in the neighborhoods like they were? It might be a question for the chief as well. But first,
Sure.
Mayor.
Yeah, no concern at all. And I think, folks are suggesting that officers aren't doing their jobs and aren't honoring their oath. I'd want facts. I think that's pretty bold for somebody to suggest that our officers who are putting their lives on the line every day aren't doing their jobs. And so if anybody has information on that, I'd like to see it. I'm doing a ride-along tomorrow night, meeting with the Police Wives Association when I get back to City Hall this afternoon. What I hear from our officers overwhelmingly is this is a very difficult time to do policing, an unprecedented time. They know that this city and this chief support our officers. We can support our officers and demand change and reform at the same time. And that is what is so important for both our officers and for the public to understand. Specifically to the Baker and Hostetler, I'm not aware that that investigation has been completed. And so once it is completed and gone through the appropriate channels, obviously that information will be released.
Briefed on it so far?
No, it's not been completed. I haven't been briefed on it. I don't know where it is in the process, but we can get you more information on the details of that, but it's not completed and not ready yet. Chief, do you want to speak to our officers and the work they're doing in neighborhoods?
Yeah, I agree with the mayor that our officers are reputable, upstanding people in this community that care about what's going on and put their lives on the line to make that difference. Just like I started, we're all here to make a difference. They will make a difference. They respond on these calls. And again, it's tragic when we deal with an individual one-on-one that has lost someone to gun violence. But we also have these officers responding on multiple deaths. They are with people and hold their hand when they take their last breath multiple times. Not just on the fatalities, but on people that are shot. They're comforting them and getting them medical help. That wears on our officers. It's this whole violence that's going on right now in our community is impacting the community. It's impacting our officers. And we're concerned about the community, and I'm concerned about the officers as well. So I support them. They know I support them. And we are making smart policy changes. We will wait till Baker, it's not an after-action report, it's a citizen complaint investigation of individual cases. When those come out, we will learn what we can from those and incorporate changes from that in our new policies as well. That does not undermine what the officers individually did, but as an organization, we can certainly look at where we could have done better organizationally and make improvements. That's my job, and I'm committed to doing that.
You don't think the officers are afraid to be doing their job in the culture that we're in, not just from you, Chief, not just from the mayor, but the culture that maybe we're feeling in the city?
I think the officers are very wise to have a realization that their actions will be under a microscope. That's a fair reality for officers. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. For them to be under a microscope, we've always been under a pretty sharp lens. To make it a microscope, it just is one more thing that is on their plate. But they train together, they work together, they're out there for the community. They will find a way to make sure that they're there for the public when they need us, and realize that their job is to be under that lens. Now, one thing I did recently speak to some legislatures about that I think need to change and for officers' benefit is that it's okay for people to be filming the police. We acknowledge that. We train officers that. You can stand there and film us all day long. It used to be the physical interaction between an officer that was really questioned. Now we're seeing that when an officer is mentally distracted by people screaming, surrounding them and screaming in their face while they're filming them, is causing distractions that can get people hurt. I'm fine with people in the public holding our officers accountable, videotaping them, doing what they want with those videos. But all I ask is please step back a little bit and don't scream at officers, and so they can't make good, thoughtful decisions based on policy and training by being overwhelmed with so many people screaming and having to watch so many different directions for their safety. So I've recommended that we look at not just a physical obstruction of officers, but to mentally obstruct an officer from doing their duty, because people could get hurt. And I don't want anyone to get hurt, officers or the public, because of those distractions. And that's very important to the welfare of everyone in the community.
Is there, under that microscope, do you feel like that is causing any of the uptick, or that's not part of it?
What I can say is the calls for service that the public are calling us to are being answered. The Shotspotter reports where no one calls us and we're alerted to gunshots, we're there. So officers are responding to the calls. They are doing what we ask them to do. All officers have a threshold for proactivity, what they want to do proactively. And whether that's stop cars and try to get guns, or if it's instead to try to have positive interaction with people in the community and build relationships, that's a decision they make in real time on the street. And those are decisions we have to support.
We have time for one more question. Ted?
Chief, a follow-up to something you said about incidents of adults putting guns in the hands of youth.
Thanks,
Yes,
sir.
are there some examples here of adults having youth carry out some kind of revengeful act on behalf of an adult? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, without going into great detail, because things are obviously investigations are pending, but I can point to a recent pharmacy robbery where an individual underage was handed a weapon and sent inside to rob the pharmacy for OxyContin. And with a time delay safe that's in there, it gave police time to respond to the alarm and interact with this individual in the store. And as a result of that interaction, a police shooting resulted, and the young man, I think he's 15, died. The person that brought him to that scene, he didn't live out in that area, left him there. I think that's one example of many, where adults are not looking out for young teens' best interests, but looking out for how they can exploit the system to get what they want out of it.
We'll stick around if there are any additional one-on-ones or follow-up.
If you have a sense of how much we're seeing right now is revenge. Killing. Shooting.
As the mayor said, this isn't really a large swath of the community, bless you, linked to a vast majority of the crimes. It's more of a concentrated group of individuals back and forth. So, yeah, I do fear that one shooting occurs here, there's a retaliation, and I think that does occur, in addition to people in this group sending people out to commit crimes to be loyal to the group. So both things are occurring at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief.
Is that okay?